thanks to everyone that's joining us from around the country, around the world, for our third part of our Healthy Home Coffee Talk series. Quick background on the Housing Innovation Alliance. So we are nationwide community game changers, 170 companies strong, focused on helping production builders build better. And we do that by curating actionable conversations focused on the alternative business models, customer engagement strategies, and delivery methods that'll power our industry forward over the coming years. Next slide, please. All right, great. This program is made possible by a list of our strategic partners, as you see in front of you here. This group has been involved both from a financial and mind space commitment perspective, and they help to drive everything we do. So one big thank you goes out to them for their support and contributions. And then again, back to our Healthy Home series. So this is the third part of a four-part series, as I mentioned. And I think that's important because we've started this discussion, and it was led by Betsy from our team, and the guest host she brought into the call. It was really looking at what I'll say is the envelope in. And we took a look at the house, the product, the technologies that we interact with when it comes to thinking about health and wellness in the built environment. Well, today we're going to kind of take things from the envelope out and take a look at it from a community and urban planning perspective, and look at how we can leverage data and strategic partnerships to drive health and wellness in the communities we design. With me today, we have a great group of thought leaders from across the country in a variety of perspectives. I'm going to introduce our facilitator, Brett Malkie, and then he's going to take the lead from there. So I've known Brett for just about 20 years now. I have the privilege of calling him a mentor and a friend. Brett runs EQA Landmark Communities, which is one of the premier placemakers in the United States, developing nearly $500 million of real estate in Western Pennsylvania alone. I actually live in one of Brett's communities because I know he thinks holistically about the integration of health and wellness into these environments, and proud to call this place home. So with that, Brett, thanks for joining us, and please introduce the rest of the squad.
Dennis, thank you. That was very thoughtful, and it hasn't been without its challenges, as we both know, but I too can, the greatest compliment I can pay you is you are my friend. So thanks very much. I'm gonna first introduce Deborah Wyatt. Deborah is an industry leader in building a sense of community. Deborah's goal is to find and execute new and innovative ways to leverage technology and data, and to bring people together and create memorable customer experiences. Her current focus is to make an impact on health and wellness accessibility through planning events and built environments within communities nationwide. Deborah is the CCO, Chief Commercial Officer with Sicilian Partners, who specializes in leveraging data, technology, and human capital. We're also joined, very appreciative to have Lauren Wallace. Again, as Dennis said earlier, quite a group of experts here today on this call. Lauren is a principal and the director of certifications and consulting at Epsten Group, where she's helped facilitate sustainability and wellness measures for thousands of projects around the globe. With a background in architecture, Lauren has more than 10 years of experience in sustainability. She speaks regularly to audiences about implementing change in the built environment, and obviously I'm very pleased to have her with us here today. Dr. Larry McEvoy, sadly he's another friend. Larry is a former emergency physician and CEO of a health system. Larry's life and work have always been about, frankly, health. The upside, as you'll soon learn from him here is that learning has led to, in complex environments where health is, literally when you're an ER doctor where it's fallen apart, is a unique body of experience, knowledge, and techniques in designing systems around results, adaptation, and well-being. So he's our health guy, among others, and an innovator in this, health exponential environment that we're all trying to figure out. So, Larry, we're elated to have you here today, and look forward to your thoughts. Finally, David Dixon. David is a much sought-after expert in urban planning and design. David is well known for helping create new, very relevant to our times, mixed use, not only urban, but suburban urban districts around the country and the world. planning, revitalization, and redevelopment of suburban and urban downtowns. David's been recognized, not surprisingly, a number of awards from AIA, APA, CNU, Congress for New Urbanism, and the International Downtown Association. David is a fellow of the AIA, and he was honored with their Thomas Jefferson Medal for a lifetime of creating livable neighborhoods. So David, elated to have you here as well. So everyone, welcome. I'll remind everyone, it's good to remind us that we're in a group of builders and developers. So I'm going to start off with our healthcare guy, Dr. Larry McEvoy. We've just experienced, Larry, one of two colossal health events in the last century. What are some of the things, if you'll start us off, the implications that are emerging from this pandemic for builders and developers in the built environment?
Well, Brett, I think the exciting thing is that in the midst of all this, builders and developers are uniquely positioned, not just, I think, to create an unbelievable evolution of the business model to their benefit and the benefit of the customers. I think they're in a position to really drive health at a systemic and societal level, which to me is pretty exciting. Now, you mentioned I'm an ER doc, so my life consisted of watching people's lives spin apart and fall apart out of control. Did that for years and years, and it's kind of funny that bad things can happen to any of us, but really, if you look at what really affects Americans' health right now, it's stuff that we have a lot of control over societally, even though individuals may or may not. And for the classic advice we would always give at the bedside is, look, if you want to be healthy, we know that recipe, right? Don't have bad habits, right? Exercise, eat good food, sleep, have healthy relationships, spend time outside, and have a purpose to your life. Who knew, right? I mean, grandma was right, and all these things that we've heard for years and years. We have abundant scientific evidence now that really works at the individual, the group, and the population level. We also have abundant evidence that in my native industry, my native sector, healthcare, we're picking up the pieces at the back end of the exhaust pipe or the sewage pipe in terms of the sort of health quotient, too late to really fix things. And so if you think about where does health come from, it comes from the way we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. Some of that's at work, a big portion of it, but now a big portion even of our work is at home. See all of us on this call. And so where we live, both, our building, whether it's an apartment complex or a house, our neighborhood, and the ecosystem of food, transportation, community activities, building materials, all those things really form the platform where this secret recipe of no bad habits, exercise, sleep, food, relationships can play out. So as you can see, I get excited about this, so I'm not going to go too into it in my preamble here. But I think if you're a builder or developer now, you're not just buying and selling houses and land, you're literally in the business of creating health. And on the consumer and buyer side, one of the things this pandemic did for everybody is say, gee, and this is not new for us as physicians, health is not something we can take for granted, right? I mean, if you had cancer in your life, you knew that. But as a population, we really have come to take health for granted. And the pandemic made us question everything from supply chains to how healthy is it to eat in a restaurant? So shouldn't I be outside versus inside? The upshot is I think there are a whole bunch of buyers or future home buyers out there, neighborhood seekers, if you will, and they're really looking for three fundamental things that are essential ingredients to health. One is safety, right? Is this a safe place? And safety means many things, of course. Two, do I have access to the things I need? Again, food, transportation, jobs, outside, gardens, view sheds. I mean, there's a whole bunch of layers there. And three, what's my connection? I mean, am I connected to the technology that I need to work from home, to stay relevant in the society, to innovate, to create a business, start a business, meet people I need to know? And am I connected to what's really important in my life? Because that's the other thing I think that the pandemic rattled us on is we've been spending a whole bunch of time, and are we really spending it the right way or not? So micro to macro, people are asking that question. I think it puts builders and developers in a profoundly unique, opportune state, both in terms of business development and contribution to society. I'm done, I'm out. I know there are a lot of people on the call. I'll pause for a second and let you turn it over to some of them.
Deborah, Larry, thank you. That was extremely interesting. Deborah, I'd like to turn to you because you sort of represent builders and developers. Obviously are poignantly customer focused, or they perish. And I was drawn by what you do each and every day and thinking about living and dying what the customer thinks about. As it relates to the builder and developer, what are the opportunities, or if you can, one of the biggest opportunities in the midst of, as it relates to customers and what you're hearing from people in light of what's going on in health and wellness in our world right now?
Yeah, thank you. I think the biggest opportunities that developers and builders have right now is, we spoke about it a little bit before the call, is leading with empathy, but really trying to connect with the consumer and knowing and understanding why they're making this move right now. Obviously people are needing bigger homes, or they are looking to upgrade, get out of a rental because they want more controls to know what's actually going on in their home. But the average consumer right now has a huge, I wouldn't say disconnect, but lack of understanding and education around things that they should be looking for. And I think developers have a huge opportunity right now to understand and leverage what they're doing. Right now, previous to the pandemic, a lot of it was very narrow-minded, like narrow focus when it comes to health and wellness in a community. We've got trails, we hold a 5K, we've got a gym, great, we've nailed our health initiative, we're a healthy community. Where now I think the messaging can start to shift to help people understand how to use the community in a healthy way. From working from home to school at home, recess is now at a playground. And, how close is that playground to your house? And how beneficial is it to you to be able to get out and take a call in a safe neighborhood, in a safe street, in a quiet park, those types of things. From the builder perspective, I think it's really trying to leverage what they're already doing for best practices and healthy standards when it comes to construction, but putting it into terms that a consumer or a prospect or a home buyer can really understand and relate to. So if I want to upgrade specific things within my home, what's the health benefit to that? Is it going to impact my child's asthma positively or negatively? And does it make sense to reposition the layout of your home so you have more natural light in your office to help from a mental standpoint of, sun exposure in the home? And so I think there's these anomalies that builders and developers need to start to gravitate towards in embracing those opportunities of really leveraging health and how they can in their plans, designs, and kind of communicating to their consumers.
Wow, thank you. That was very helpful. David, jump in. Obviously, hearing the poignant issues that are raised, and then the issues as it relates to addressing the customer. Are we at a pivotal point in time, in your opinion, in public policy and design, where we should, as builders and developers and placemakers, be looking at new products, or are we at a pivot point? Should we still be building the same stuff, just tweaking it a little bit, or should we be looking at new ways of creating place and homes? And is this a unique opportunity or moment in history to do so?
I'll just say yes and save everybody time. No, I think it is. I would agree very strongly with both everything Deborah and Larry said, and I want to sort of approach this from a slightly different perspective. In some ways, actually, COVID is making more clear trends that have been fundamentally in place for some time. Now, one of the things I think the false messages we're getting is that density is dangerous and people perceive density to be dangerous. In fact, COVID correlates much more strongly with poverty than density. And there's a lot of data out now that says, with the exception of San Francisco and New York, urban and suburban markets are performing basically relative to each other exactly as they did for the previous probably roughly 5 years. right through the midst of the pandemic. What I think is really important to remember is that literally 80+% of all net new households for the next 2 decades, 20 years, are going to be singles and couples without kids. We have built our housing stock is 62% single family detached today. We have built America, North America, I should say, for a very different population than the one that is heading our way very quickly. And this is, we probably have the most urban demographics in terms of a housing market heading toward us that we've had certainly in my very overly long lifetime. There's a whole lot of data that says that the healthiest place to live is one in which you do a lot of walking. My 6-year-old grandson, not my 6-year-old, my 6-year-old grandson, just returned from being in Vermont for a couple of months for reasons we can probably all guess, to Brooklyn. And I was there last weekend and realized that he spent hours and hours and hours on his bike. He didn't get in a car once. He got exercise literally all weekend. That is about as healthy a lifestyle, and his parents walked everywhere, basically running after him, as one can live. The fact that our housing market is going to be so urban, the fact that urban, walkable, mixed use, and therefore walkable living is the healthiest model we can construct for people is a very important convergence, to sort of touch on something Larry had said. And I think the ability of builders and developers to really come in and take advantage of that, get past the memes that are out there today, is going to be really critical for our ability to build the kind of society we need to from a health perspective, but also really to meet the market demands that we have. Much of this is going to take place in suburbs. A colleague and I edited a book called Suburban Remix, The Next Generation of Urban Places, that came out about a year and a half ago. And basically what we argued, but it was based on a lot of data, is in fact, the future of suburban growth is urban walkable mixed use centers, because that's the market is going to be folks without kids. These we can create as much healthier places than the kinds of places we've been creating for the last 50 years. And I'll close on one point, and this is a tough point, and it's a difficult one, and it's very troubling. Sorry to close on it here, but this all works for folks with the incomes to be able to afford in livable, walkable places. We are a society with widening income wealth gaps, and the number of folks who actually live below the poverty line in suburbs, which are less healthy because you have to drive everywhere, you're not getting exercise naturally, is up by more than 70% since 2000. I mean, this has been a remarkably rapid transition. It's because they're getting pushed out as folks with more resources move into the healthier, walkable, more amenitized places we're creating. So I would say there are two challenges that the building industry, housing industry can help us all with. One are really creative and well-designed mixed-use models for urban housing. The other is to help make the case for mixed income housing, which requires public investment. There are very few places where internal subsidy will support mixed income housing. Mixed income housing really needs public investment, so that we don't, as we build our great urban environments, don't gentrify a lot of folks out to less healthy environments. And I'll pause there.
That's very, very, Lauren, I will pull you into the conversation. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. As a leading professional as a sustainable expert, if you will, how health and wellness have always been defined metrics within sustainability. How, in light of what's happening in our world now, how is that changing? Are we changing how we measure sustainability and how we think about health and wellness in building better right now? Or is that conversation underway, needs to start, hasn't started yet? Where are we on
Well, in my world, for at least the last 5 years, if not maybe 6, I know that health and wellness has been pulled under that sustainability umbrella, right? There have always been health and wellness components within the rating systems that we work with, within the standards and the guidance that drive how we look at design for buildings, whether it's homes to commercial spaces, even to, the parks and the things that we all want in our neighborhoods and within a walkable distance. But really, a lot of that was focused on air quality, the amount of air, the amount of daylight, and also the types of materials that you were bringing into a space. And it's been expanded to a whole lot more now. And the metrics are certainly different, where, we were looking at efficiency in terms of how much water are you using and what are your fixtures rated for. Now it's the quality of water. What's in the water? What are you drinking? And, I think really what we end up talking to designers and developers about a whole lot now are the same things that Dr. McEvoy rattled off. We know, scientists know, doctors know, people know what makes you healthy and well. But now we're discussing how a building contributes to that, right? And there's obviously a whole host of things that happen in the built environment that people don't pay attention to. So that's a little bit of what Deborah was talking about, right? They know that they like this space. They know that they like this neighborhood, but they have a hard time, maybe vocalizing exactly what it is that they like. And I think there's not a single person from Washington to Northern California who would argue that air quality is important and that when it's not great, let alone the worst in the world. I mean, never in my lifetime did I think we'd be talking about a place in the United States that's worse than the air quality that they've been seeing in China for years, right? So it's there are things that are outside of our control, but when you build a space, when you build a community, there are things that you can control. And I think that's a little bit of what Dr. McEvoy was talking about too. We're putting this on developers. We're putting this on, the people that are making these decisions, that are constructing these environments. We have metrics, we have data that say this is what helps someone thrive. This is what helps someone live a healthier life, make better choices. The hardest metric and the hardest, I think, group or community to affect is a little bit of what David was talking about, are the lower income people. And I think I know that in our community that equity piece is what they're really striving to try and focus on, because just like sustainability, when it was first introduced into the market for the built environment, it was only for the wealthy or the top few percent. And it's kind of going the same way with health and wellness in the built environment too. So hopefully, I think that's the work we have cut out for us over the next few years, is how do we change that?
Thank you. Again, we'll open it up to everyone. Again, we're here to help be a part of a conversation to affect change in an environment of what gone from obviously a healthcare crisis. I'm a builder, I'm a developer, I've got architects, planners, ER, physician, executive, sustainability expert. What would you advise our listeners? Where do I start? What should I do next? Do I call a hospital and see if they'll work with me? Do I buddy up with my local doctor? Do I find a better architect and help me design different products? It's a big topic. How would you advise the builders and developers on the call here today to jump in?
I got two thoughts, and I'm going to try to weave in a question from Betsy Scott, which is in the chat thing if you guys haven't seen it. So I'll take the small and the tall, Brad, okay? The small is this. No matter what you're doing right now in your existing business model, and Deborah alluded to this a little bit, there are things you can do that I think meet the sweet spot of making things more sellable, more desirable to the marketplace, to consumers and buyers, and healthier, right? I mean, things as simple as where you put windows and as, walking paths, the way you orient buildings, window boxes on porches, for Pete's sakes, right? I mean, little data from my field, we know whether you're an urban person or a rural person, if you have a medical procedure and can see out a window to a trees or sky or a garden, no matter what you think of the outdoors, your immune system will function better, your stress hormones will decrease, and your blood pressure will decrease. You'll heal better. Weird, but it's actually a science. So I think the small part is find out those little things that are actually appealing to you as a builder and developer and to the customers. I think the tall part is don't be afraid to stretch yourself and start looking at really what is a pretty integrated multidisciplinary field of how to design health at the landscape and place level that should integrate personal health, family health, neighborhood health, environmental health, societal health. I think it's an exciting field, and you got to sort of weave some things together. So this might be one you put in the back burner as you're thinking strategically, but we're finding out more and more how to integrate and build space that drives health. One part of Betsy's question is, well, what about the technology piece? We know that, if you're going to build a successful human ecology anywhere these days, whether it's Congress or a school board or a neighborhood, technology is inevitable. The question is, can we integrate technology in a way that drives health or subsumes it? Because it will do both, right? So Johnny and Susie doing video games in a dark basement all day long are using technology and, a lot of RAM and great NVIDIA graphics and all that stuff. They're not getting healthier, right? We know that our brains actually are built to work fast in some ways, but the fast part of our brain is really the fight or flight part. It's not the creative, strategic, innovative part. That's a slow brain function. So you can use technology to speed brains up or slow them down. You can use technology to put people together or to isolate them. So I think not only looking at the overt health aspects of digital health technology, and I know that's out there because Apple buzzed me while we were talking and said they're coming out with a watch and a fitness service, right? So that's everywhere. I think how you guys as developers and full disclosure, I'm helping start a company for hospitalizing people at home. Because in COVID, we were opening the windows, for Pete's sakes, in hospitals to decrease infectious risk and sending a lot of people home because they were safer at home. So that's going to continue to flow, this integration of humanity and technology. If you're out there wondering, should I get a hold of a hospital, just call one up. I would say that most of the health villages right now, or whatever they call them, and a lot of them call them health villages, are still built on the primary payment model of healthcare, which is when you get broken or break and need a procedure that we can bill you for, we'll make money. And that can be done well or poorly, by the way. And if you're tearing your aorta or bleeding into your brain or locking up an artery in your heart, you want that very badly. Fixing damage is not the same thing as growing health. And in healthcare, we still haven't figured out how to monetize health appreciation, if you will, the way we monetize wealth appreciation in the financial planning industry. So as you think about that, I'm not knocking health villages or partnering with healthcare organizations at all. Just find ones that really are after promulgating and monetizing health, not just sort of health washing, if you will, what could be just a capture system to, really creating a loyal and confined population when they break. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying it's not the same thing that we're talking about here. One last thing I'd say with regard to David's point about sort of the gentrification of health is that these new market tax credits do allow people to think about how to leverage dollars into mixed use and mixed income communities. I know one colleague of mine here in Colorado Springs is actually blank slating this and in a pretty banged up area of town and rehabbing it with some of these tax credits and working with the community to define access to libraries, groceries, the kind of food the community wants, walking, education, and an integrated place experience, if you will, de novo. So David's pointing out a really important issue. But again, I think there's a business opportunity there, and I think there are ways to go about that rather than just wait around and hope someone else figures it out. And that's, I think, what's exciting about the group of people on the call. So I swallowed a lot of elephants there. I know other people have thoughts because I can see them nodding and smiling as well as rolling their eyes at me as I monopolize the time. So Greta, not again. Back to you guys.
So I'll jump in real quick. I think one of the biggest kind of things that we've seen, speaking to Larry's point in the healthcare system and that type of stuff, is where to start. I think if you're starting from like a concept plan and everything else, you're kind of, sky's the limit, right? So it's identifying various partners that you can bring in that kind of will look at the community overall, how people are going to interact, how they're going to come through, how can we design places and spaces that, you know, naturally activate creative play for kids and allow people to have access quickly from their home to get to the trails, to get some fresh air, to kind of move, right? And then it goes into landscape design and those types of things that kind of have natural flora and those types of things that kind of just create that space. But I think for communities that are already established, where to start is to look at what you already have and how can you start to reframe expectations and relate it to who's already there and how they're using it. Are they using it? If they're not using it, how could we, why aren't they? And how can we make modifications or just promote why to use it? A lot of times you'll see in community developments, and builders will gravitate towards this too, of open space, right? We have X amount of acres and acres of open space, which are great. But then we just kind of leave it at that, where if the messaging is, you know, 80% of our homes in our next phase back up to open space, or, you know, 100% of our community is going to be within a 3-minute walk to open space or trail. That's very tangible. It's very practical for somebody who's looking at a new home or, you know, those types of things. So I think there's messaging and ways that we can educate versus just saying we have something. You know, how do we break it down even further and kind of moving it forward as we grow into our communities and how people interact and use them today and moving forward?
David,
Yeah, I definitely had a few thoughts too. I think, sorry, Brett. I wanted Deborah to be able to answer Betsy's question because I know that her question was directly towards her, but I think really quickly, there's a scale to everything, right? We need to educate our planners so that when they're looking at master, you know, designs and master plans for neighborhoods or cities even, they're starting to incorporate some of these ideas to show developers coming into the area, this is what we want, or this is what we're demanding. And then from there, things start to get incorporated into design guidelines, right? You cannot build here unless it includes this, which obviously is one way to get things done. But then, you know, if you're one of these people looking at the suburban areas and, you know, what David was talking about, these mixed use communities, have some sort of, you know, earmarked retail space that you are going to lease specifically to some of these healthcare or like health and wellness retailers, like, you know, whether it's a gym or maybe it's a, you know, minute clinic or things like that. I think, you know, there's always ways to kind of to get there, no matter what you're trying to accomplish. It's all a scale.
I have a comment, but
hey, David.
Yeah. Okay.
I wanted to take you again. I'm as our narrator poignantly reminded of who our audience is, and help everyone here. I'd like to go to the micro level. I'd like to go to the home.
Yeah.
I've been a part as a developer. Ironically, I love this conversation, but I'm thinking of some of my builder friends. And I was a part of a recent discussion where something I wouldn't have thought was humanly possible is underway, where the open floor plan is now being attacked. And there's a big movement back to the older floor plans and existing homes that have chopped up rooms, which we would have thought as a builder and developer was anathema to success. Have we reached a point for our audience, our builders on the phone, where a home, Larry said he's helping a company turn the home into part hospital. Have we reached a point where we need to now, as building professionals and designers, be thinking of the home as adaptable and start truly designing homes to walls to move and rooms to be added more easily? Are we there yet?
So I'd like to be a visionary and say yes, but I'm going to actually give a more balanced answer. I'm also going to sneak in a macro point at the end if I could. So I think one of the things that I remember from after 9/11, there were headlines that said things like density kills. There were a series of articles in very respectable journals that said we will never build another tower in the US again. This was in 2011, right before we probably built half the towers we have today, because of the immediate reaction to 9/11. And I think the point here is probably obvious. We are in the midst of something now that is hugely disruptive and frightening. Yet, if we look at the fundamental demographics and economic development trends that are shaping our markets the next 20 years, they aren't changing one bit. Our market will still be 62% of our housing will be single family detached, 80+% of demand will be for multifamily and probably townhouse, et cetera. There will be tremendous, two issues here, tremendous demand for sort of filling the gap, what's missing, and that's going to be urban, and probably the biggest single transformational opportunity, I'm going macro again here, that the building industry will have in terms of being able to meet that need. At the same time, we're going to have a lot of single family suburbs without maybe enough demand for all the houses folks my age will be selling. How do we really introduce the sort of mixed use walkable centers that make them marketable? So what does all this have to do with health and to get back to your issue around flexibility? I think actually the issue is not so much flexibility in homes as adapting those homes to the very different market that is coming. We have built our housing stock for households with kids. The demand will not be there going forward. Whether that means movable walls so much as understanding that public squares are our living rooms and family rooms are not what we need to be building. And we have a much, much more flexible approach to how we work coming forward. Those are the kinds of things I think the building industry should really focus on. One of the things that we've noted a lot in our work is that folks who work virtually, if they don't have kids, tend to be even more interested in living in dense, walkable, community-rich environments than their peers who work in an office. So that's the shift, the dramatic shift in how working patterns is if anything going to further the demand for these sort of walkable, healthy places. And I think it's actually much less about how the unit changes. Obviously, the ability to work at home is the greatest change, and find someone to take care of your kids if you are lucky enough to have them. But it is adapting to the very different nature of housing demand going forward. One of the things that came up in an earlier conversation we had, which I'm just fascinated by, is accounting. Right now, if you look at the federal discretionary budget, all of it will be required to cover healthcare costs by the year 2050, because more than half our population growth between now and then is going to be folks over 65, of which I am proudly one, and we get expensive as we get older. That will leave no dollars for transit, for all the things that we look to federal money for. Okay, what the building industry should be doing now, I think, is building the kinds of alliances that help us point out if we can support their ability, your ability to build in healthier places to live, to build the kind of urban walkable environments, which often take a good deal of subsidy. I want to be clear about here. It's a lot more complicated to build in the middle of a city than on a greenfield site. But if you look at the healthcare savings by providing that more expensive urban environment, which we got to help the building industry with, the savings are profound for us as a society. I'll add one more related point. One thing that I marvel at, I've been involved in projects that got wellness certifications, and I was really proud of them and the developers who sought those. And that involved the interior environments and the kinds of food that could be served and all kinds of things. Nevertheless, these were often places for the best educated, healthiest folks in America, because those are the ones who could afford to live and work there. 10 miles away, you'd have a place with a life expectancy that was 10 or 15 years less. Everybody in that affluent, healthy, well-educated wellness district paid a tax, whether they knew it or not, to take care of those folks 10 miles away because the government had to step in and do it. If we could all get together and work politically, and the building industry could really be a leader so that we built healthier communities, everyone would have saved money as well as had better lives, particularly if you lived in that neighborhood 10 miles away. Did this make sense, or did I try and get too many ideas in at once? Is that...
We
Makes sense.
Good discussion, and it's okay. Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, can I weigh in on your question, Brett, about sort of interior design and shape? Is that so?
Please do.
ER doctor on spatial design. You know, if you look at, again, sort of the irony of opening windows in hospitals during COVID and sending people home, and you look at the fact that we don't want to congregate en masse anymore, at least for a while, and you look at the sort of scramble this has put for schools, restaurants, homes, we've got that, and we've got an opposite problem from an interior spatial layout dimension, which is, I think, something we're all familiar with. During the lockiest days of the lockdown, I think we had 5 Zoom users in our house, right? I had a grad student, 2 high school students, the back office of my business, and me, and we're all on Zoom at the same time. That doesn't work in an open floor plan. It feels like you're in a trading pit, right? So are we going back to segmented, you know, rat maze homes, whether those are multifamily or not? No, I don't think so. Are we going to open and isolated? I don't think so. I think, as David alluded, I think we're going to something that is a combination private space, public space in the home, and is probably flexible and fluid and has visual screens and borders, but allows things like airflow and indoor outdoorness. I mean, look at all the kids. My sister-in-law was in Manhattan and recently moved to a suburb. Those school kids are outside as much as possible right now for safety reasons, which turns out to be really good for health as well. So I think, again, I'm an ER doctor. What the heck do I know about this stuff? I think we're probably headed toward layout design intra-home, within the home, and among homes that enhances indoor-outdoor and flexibility and a sense of open space that allows people to congregate safely and not be isolated, but allows people also to sort of have narrow networks, right? You don't want to be hanging out with 10,000 of your best friends anyway. And so what is sort of the intimacy of place look like now in a way that's open and flowy, if you will, but you can still sort of gate things? I think it'd be really, really interesting. And I think there are probably some opportunities out there, again, to integrate some of the things Deborah mentioned about open space, gardens, aesthetics, walking, where common areas are more discretional and not so locked down, pardon the pun.
As a quick postscript to that, given the fact, I'd love to get things to see. I'd love to understand what trends COVID is uncovering as opposed to looks like it's changing, but might not change when it's gone, if that makes sense. So, you know, what is it accelerating? So the fact that more than half of US population growth, actually this is developed world population growth, will be over 65 for the next 20 years, probably has more to do with how we need to be thinking about configuring units, because there are going to be an awful lot more older folks who are going to need care from younger members of their family, often married with kids, than has historically been the case. That probably has as much, if not more, to do with how we need to think about configuring and providing flexibility in housing units. Is this making sense? Than the immediate response to COVID.
Two thoughts as your narrator, that I hear all of you. By the way, folks, great job. I hope everyone listening is getting as much benefit from this as I I think I am. I'm hearing you say, and I want to touch the third rail because I feel like a professional. We're now in a time where we need to come together, and the only way to do that is to be bold. So first, what I hear you all saying is you can't think of indoor and outdoor anymore. You can't think of home versus community. We need to holistically design place, includes outdoor and indoor space, how we interact as humans, how we have private space, how we have protective space, and that includes our interaction, that includes us as older and as younger people, and we've got to literally design the built environment. Having said that, in the law of unintended consequences, this is the third rail. I don't want to leave what you said earlier, David. I really think we would be remiss in not addressing this as a group. So if I need to be 6 feet apart, and we've talked about an affordability problem in housing and a social need to deliver new and better homes to people of limited means, how the heck do we do that when smaller has challenges on health? What do you do? What do we do as a society, as professionals, to address? There is an massive affordability issue in this country. What do we do?
Well, first of all, we don't turn to the building industry and say, you solve it, you're building them. We acknowledge the fact that there is literally no way to create broad affordability without significant public investment. And one of the things that I find fascinating is there is much less market resistance to living in mixed income housing. And my peers in the industry, I bow to you immediately, but in the survey data and the consultant, real estate, housing consultants we talk with, talk about the fact that there's even resistance to many folks from living in kind of a white bread environment. They want to feel they're part of a diverse and real world. So, and we're involved in a lot of planning for mixed income housing, and these projects have been moving forward without concerns around the market component, fear around living in a diverse environment. So the possibility is there. We have to look to the public sector to fund, and that means tap the incredible wealth that's being created in urban, denser, mixed-use environments to really fund a robust mixed income housing agenda, which frankly will accrue to the benefit of the housing industry. And there are a lot of great allies out there who care about the same thing. This is by no means an issue that the housing industry can be the greatest contributor to the solution, but should not be expected to unlock the ability to go there. I'm not sure if I quite got at your question or not. What is happening with lower income folks who live in more crowded situations is that they don't have the flexibility that many of us have to work from home. They do not have the ability to go to the doctor because they literally can't pay for the trip and they can't get there. And there are a whole series of causative factors. It turns out that density alone does not particularly correlate with incidence of COVID, of this pandemic right now. I think I'm probably wandering topics here, but did I get at your question?
Again, very helpful. It's sort of that we left the cities. I'm a planner by background, so we left the cities en masse because they were polluted and dirty and nasty, and we created what was called the suburb. Then we exited the cities, and then everybody ran back to the city, and now the city's the answer. From a health and wellness standpoint, traditionally as a builder and developer, I'd go to exurbia, and I'd go farther out, and in some ways, I even more now feel the compelling desire to go, hey, I'll give you health, I'll give you wellness, let's go out farther. And again, but my sustainability hat says that's a terrible idea.
So Brett, can I quote Ronald Reagan here? Why not?
This will be good, yeah.
I can't remember the speech, but sometime when I was a teenager, I remember saying, well, you can run, but you can't hide. And if we go back to your thought about, 6 feet apart and, David saying, well, we can't ask the building community to do it. I'll ask everyone on this call, and you can ask everyone you know today, how many of you have been 6 feet apart from everybody for the last 8 months, right? So and I'm not knocking the science on what inhibits transmission of infectious agents in a population. We know this stuff. The way this is pointing to us to, I think, is embedded in the chat by Michael Joyce, which is, we're not going to try to create either a community and society or a built environment that's entirely based on a 6-foot radius of total isolation for all individuals. If you want that, go watch the movie WALL-E. It's a wonderful little allegorical film. You can watch it with your kids. These are not happy people. This is not a healthy society. It doesn't drive innovation, freedom, civic connection, social contract, nothing, right? So what are you going to do then? I mean, if you look at what really has worked well in the pandemic, that, as many people have said throughout this call, has been learning and awareness of trends that have been going on for a long time. It's really the design of human community as an ecosystem, right? Integrated parts. So transportation, food, energy, social network, in a way that's open enough that you're not waiting across 9 time zones for a screw, a bolt, or a mango, and close enough that you can get that stuff locally, but it's also modular enough that you can segment it and partition it enough when you need to. Subpopulations, right? Now, of course, the risk of subpopulations is failure to get exchange between them at the economic, innovative design level, and that's going to breed tribalism and divisiveness, which we have too much of anyway. But the positive way to look at this is the way ecosystems work, right? They're open enough to create free exchange, and they're closed enough that they can put up barriers quickly and temporarily when they need to. And as bizarre as it sounds, and again, I get to be the medical geek here, in each of our bodies, there are 100 trillion cells. And the way that they control gating and borders is really quite elegant. It's open almost all the time, and it's closed whenever there's a risk. So, if, to me, death is being forced to stay 6 feet apart from everybody all the time forever. I mean, I can't hug my kids, right? I can't hug my neighbors. So most of us are finding a way, one way or the other. And out of that, I think, are some pretty interesting thoughts about how we design neighborhoods and homes such that food, energy, transportation, community, culture, entertainment, engagement are proximate. They're not something you go travel a long way for behind 15 coded locks with certain kinds of passports. And at the same time, it's not one big mosh pit where everyone's swirling around each other either. So the built industry and the building and development industry has so much to say about how we do this in a way that's sane, sensible, safe, and healthy. As you can see, my enthusiasm for this oozes through the screen. But who needs another boring Zoom call?
Again, Lauren, help us, which is sometimes what not to do is more important than what to do. We heard, again, don't overreact to COVID is a theme I've heard in this call, and it's incredibly helpful. I must admit, I have not stayed 6 feet apart from people in the last hour. So what should I do? What can I do? How would you advise the folks on this phone to think about health and wellness, and what actions might they take, going forward in the coming minutes and hours and days and weeks ahead?
Lauren, and just before you answer that, I'm going to give you plenty of time. I just, as the keeper of the clock, I have to be the bad guy here and say that we have about 15 minutes left. We're going to extend the call out a little bit because typically when things really get going, we'll go to that 3:15 mark on the Eastern time zone. So I'll come back about 10 after and we'll wrap up the session then, but please, Lauren, continue on.
Yeah, so number one thought, and if you don't remember anything else from this call today, please, please, please remember this. Focus on air ventilation, 100%. You can have however many people in a space 6 feet apart and you will still spread this disease because it's in the air. It doesn't matter if you're coughing, talking, laughing, singing, sneezing, whatever the case may be. It's in the air, and you have to have better air ventilation. The most, technology savvy buildings in the world are still not providing adequate air ventilation that would make returning to most spaces safe for people. So to a community, you know, that is focused on homes, it's horrible. We've always focused on conditioning the air, but not ventilation, or what we do with recircled air, like recirculating air. So go buy stock in space air purifiers, because that is the key. And it's pretty much what we've been, you know, telling everybody. It's what I've done in my own home. It's how we're able to host a pod for my son's and his a couple of his classmates. So it's you know, I think the other thing that we should all think about are ways that we can reduce the person-to-person contact when possible. So, for example, does someone have to be standing there as everybody scans their badge when they walk into a building, or is scanning your badge enough, right? Things like that. You know, obviously, I'd be sad if I wasn't able to like wave to my, you know, postal worker from my office window every day, but I'm not going out there and grabbing the mail from that person, right? I'm letting them put it in its little box, and then as soon as they've, you know, gone on to the next house, I go out and get it. So it's small moves, and I don't think, you know, I think it's 100% underline everything that Larry said. Things will be normal, but we have to be able to close them off or change the way that we do things when it's necessary, and hopefully with enough, you know, fast enough manner that it's easy to do and keeps everybody safe. But yeah, air ventilation, 100% air ventilation.
And Lauren, I 100% agree with you. And, you know, limiting the contact to contact, this industry, developers, builders, it's a relationship industry. You know, there's a big transaction, a home purchase is the biggest purchase somebody makes in their life, multiple times, once, however many times. And so there is that huge emotional connection, and it's been challenging for the industry to kind of go digital, right? However, as a consumer, if we can empower them with information and as much things as they can, scheduling online, seeing tours, interacting with the community where they could potentially live, and kind of charging them up, so that way when they do come with their family, they know what to expect. They have somebody that's there and knows exactly what they want, and they can kind of feel like it's more catered to them versus doing all of this research online and identifying the community that they want to live in, and then feeling like they walk in the door and it just started all over. Like they don't even know why I'm standing here. So I think that's been an opportunity for our industry to kind of bridge that gap on creating a better customer journey from that aspect. And I know Betsy had a question in regards to amenities, you know, in a newer community that might be focused on health. Like, what can you do when, you know, the amenity might be two years out? And, you know, there's a lot you can do in a parking lot, in a small park, in model homes, in the backyards, or in the landscaping areas of a model park that are there, that you can do various social distancing. So it's just a matter of being creative and thinking through how can you potentially leverage these unique spaces while it's still small, and then taking the people who are interested or under contract, or those first kind of founding families, right, that move in, and really trying to connect them and making sure that they too understand the vision of the community, because they'll be the ones that'll champion it for years to come as people come into the community and kind of, you know, migrate through what it looks like and how we're going to embrace health. And, you know, I've worked on a couple of projects across the country where they've really tried to take health one step further, and working with particular healthcare facilities and helping them with their community outreach, you know, working with those smaller communities that may be way out, you know, get further away, and we'll build it, they'll come. But a lot of times they don't necessarily have a park and recs department. And so, or really a health department that can support those. So it's almost put on the developer to kind of bring those, you know, fresh ideas, those thinkings and tools to those smaller towns. as they start to become more established in that type of stuff. And I would challenge anybody who is building or developing in, you know, states that are on that less healthy side of things. I can think Tennessee comes to mind, and I'm sorry, people in Tennessee, that I think it was in 2018 or 2019 were noted as being number 50, the 50th state for childhood obesity. That's sad. So if I were a developer in trying to get a plan or, you know, project off the ground, I would be selling that how we're going to leverage this community to build healthier places for our kids, how we're going to integrate the school to be a walking school bus. You know, we won't need buses. We're going to get our kids healthy. That's a very powerful message to anybody on the politician side of why you would want that community to help the overall global community.
Dennis, Betsy, and Paige, having been a first-time narrator, I'm sure, or I hope that there are lots of folks that are listening and this has spurred some thoughts and ideas and questions. So we'll defer to, since we're here to help, should we allow questions to those that are listening and online?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Brett, and thanks to the entire panel. So we've actually done a fantastic job of addressing the questions as they're coming in, and thankfully so, because some of them would have been quite lengthy for me to read versus you just catching them in the chat box. So I appreciate everyone for jumping on those. I think I want to, there's an opportunity to elaborate on one point that Deborah started to touch on. So as we look at the partnerships that can take place between in process or in progress communities and the existing infrastructure around it, you know, is there enough being done? I'm going to connect it to another question that was asked. Is there enough being done, say, at the community level to have kind of a health and wellness concierge? Because we think of health and wellness a lot from the medical perspective, and the question even alludes to telehealth helping to give access to healthcare. But you have to really think, and we've talked about this throughout the call, it's a mind, body, soul connection, right? And how do you take that kind of holistic approach? So, you know, what are you seeing, let's say, from the HOA perspective in driving this? Is there enough of it happening? And what other partnerships are you seeing formalized between communities and their surrounding areas that we can talk about? So there's a couple different things, you know, 3 prongs of the fork we can talk about, whoever would like to jump in. But I'd like to hear what you have to say first, Deborah. Yeah,
so I think from kind of the concierge approach or the HOA side, there's definitely in bigger NPCs across the country, there's always been fitness programs, you know, little leagues, that type of stuff, to kind of foster those relationships and programs. I do think that there are some trends and things that are starting to evolve where somebody's going to have more of a focus on health and not necessarily just taking over and managing the fitness instructors or the technology, the fitness on demand, that type of stuff. It's more of, you know, do they have a nutritional background? They're leveraging local chefs to come in and talk about cooking and preparing a healthy home. You know, those types of things, leveraging CSAs. You know, farm is starting to take over, you know, that farming agriculture side from an amenity, because food access is a big deal and where food comes from and that educational components that come with it. And so I think that there is this kind of makeshift that you can do in either leveraging the HOA, but that also puts a various burden on, depending on how big the community is, on what that looks like. So I think there's other opportunities where you can leverage local healthcare facilities to bring programming to you because they have outreach funds, right? They can have, you know, nutritionists come and do a lecture or a talk, or if there's a new doctor that's coming into the area, they can come and, you know, meet the doctor. So you can kind of talk to them before you need them. So you have that kind of established opportunity to kind of get to connect with someone. And what I've been challenging people who have, you know, healthcare systems integrated into their community is really making sure that those doctors understand the programming and aspects and what's available to the residents that are coming to you from that said community. So if you go and say, okay, Deborah, working from home's been a ruck for you, you need to start moving more. Okay, great. What does that actually mean? Go walk a mile. Okay, in my mind, how long is a mile? What you need to do is twice a day, go walk around the amenity lake. That's it. Oh, okay. You know, it makes it more relatable. It goes back to relating and connecting it via education with the people that live and interact with our communities.
I think quick postscript to that. I'm going to come back to numbers again. So when 60+% of our houses are single family detached, and forget the singles and couples, and the majority and probably around 60% of our growth for the next 20 years is going to be folks over 65, there's another potential mismatch which you can actually bridge by what you're talking about. If HOAs have folks, we're talking right now about advice around a very specific health crisis. How should I say it? When the large majority of folks living in your single family community are getting older, you have a different kind of health crisis building. And the ability for HOAs, for local communities on a neighborhood basis to have just what you're talking about, I think will be hugely valuable, and frankly valuable in retaining value in those houses when that isn't necessarily the first housing choice that folks at that life stage would normally make. Is that making sense? Deborah, I'm sort of looking at you as I say this.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, absolutely.
And again, I think it gets us beyond the current crisis to a really significant crisis that is building. When you have a rapidly aging society, you also have a shrinking workforce, and it's going to be harder and harder to find people who, to come and do in-home care for folks. The ability to provide that collectively will be increasingly important as the majority of our growth is the folks who need help.
Well, and it ties into the conversation that we've been having for years on aging in place, right?
Oh,
How do
yes,
you age
yes.
within the community?
Yeah.
You've already moved and now you're close to your grandkids, and now you need to move because you don't have access to the health care that you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all talk about millennials moving into cool, single, walkable, mixed use, whatever, suburban centers. A very big piece of that market is folks who live in that suburb who want to age in place.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Larry, I think you're trying to add to it, but you're on mute.
No, thank you, Dennis. My wife urges me to stay on mute as much as possible so it's become a healthy habit at home. Just adding on, so this is yes and what's been said before. One of the things that's happened in healthcare organizations, definitely because of COVID, is they've just had absolute crashes and pandemonium, and everything from their revenue cycle to their flow management to all sorts of stuff. So these are great ideas, but it's worth asking, how do you sort of create a revenue model around that? So I want to just throw out a wacky idea. We're in the process of moving now, and we're going to a place we already know and where we have a house. But if you think about what buyers want when they come in, they're looking for a place for the kids, for school, all the things we've been talking about. And how often can you say you've designed that, right? So youth mental health is a big concern these days, opioid addiction, teen pregnancy, depression, anxiety, all this stuff, right? What would happen if you could design with healthcare organizations a community that actually amplified the value of real estate, of place, and social value at the same time, and how would you pay for it? And a lot of these healthcare organizations right now are responsible more and more for managing populations. That's how they're getting incented or disincented. And they've got to take care of not just the one person and make sure they don't get an infection or a wrong site surgery. They've actually got to validate that their psychosocial determinants of health are actually improving. And I think there's an opportunity there if you're a builder or a developer to link how healthcare is financed, a healthcare organization and a neighborhood at the same time. And currently we don't do that, right? You buy your insurance on an annual level, whether your cholesterol, mental health profile, addiction risk, socioeconomic projection over the next 10 years goes up or down, isn't contained in that transactional time period or monetary exchange. But if you could create across some of these population dynamics and imperatives that healthcare organizations are now having to deal with, a long-term strategy with them to actually finance healthcare coverage through the neighborhood and have the neighborhood actually be one of these confined populations at a risk level for them, I think you begin to create a value equation that probably is win-win, win-win, as far as I can count all the stakeholders really quickly off my hand. I don't know if anyone's interested in talking about that. It's beyond the scope of the call. But I think, as Deborah said, I'd love all these folks to come out with outreach and nutritionists and meet the new doctor and have all these folks there. But I wouldn't shortchange yourselves as builders and developers thinking about how to put innovative strategic and financial vehicles together that are squarely in the health sphere. I mean, I think there's a whole new product category out there, both neighborhoods and healthcare financing and long-term, I don't even want to call it care, because care to me is when you break, but let's just call it health appreciation. And I think you're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff popping up, because as David said, the cost of lost health is staggering. We just haven't really accounted it and marketed it very well. The return on health is also gigantic. And I think when builders, developers, and the healthcare ecosystem start putting those models together, I think you're going to see some pretty exciting stuff. Hopefully that's some of you guys on the call.
Dennis, if I may, as your narrative, I'd like to give a heartfelt thanks to Deborah, Lauren, Larry, and David. This has been just an unbelievably fascinating and dynamic conversation, and I'd like to leave you as your narrative with one very quick thought. We be bold as builders and developers, because I think for the first time in this industry's history, we're seeing the emergence of something that will permit all of us to at least try to be bold, and that is the emergence of what I'm going to call conscious capital. So in a future call, I would suggest to those on the group, there is an emerging where capital can't simply look for an ROI anymore. It needs to know it's improving communities and making a difference in our world. And that means for the first time in our industry, there's an opportunity to really try and be and do better. And I would challenge everybody on this call and in the coming days and months and years ahead that, seek out those sources. Let's get a call about, who those people are so that we can and do and be better.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brett, and thank you for everyone on the call for your contributions. Thank you, Lauren, for the additional information you provided about the local Department of Health for certain organizations. So the good news is we don't have to wait that long for a follow-up discussion, right? So we have our think tank on this coffee talk next week. So everyone, I believe just about everybody that's on the panel today has committed to be there next week as well. You can register for that on our website. We'll be happy to have you, and we can continue this conversation as well as dig into a couple other topics. And depending on the subject matter, we can split out into different rooms so that we can all kind of run in different directions and then aggregate that afterwards. So that will be the think tank on September 24th. Again, you can register on our website for that. And then we will have our risks and opportunities for innovation coffee talk on September 29th with the think tank to that the week thereafter. So we have plenty of opportunities to continue this conversation around healthy homes and healthy communities and the strategic partnerships required to make them successful. Ultimately, we'll be rolling that up as a theme or a topic to be kind of further addressed within our Innovation Summit, which will take place on November 10th and 11th. On the 11th, we will roll up Healthy Homes as a New Energy Efficiency, aggregating all of the conversations from our coffee talks, our think tanks, and podcasts that have been taking place behind the scenes with subject matter experts that either were not able to attend or didn't directly fit into the conversations taking place over this past few weeks, but have a lot of value to add to that conversation. So please keep an eye out for that. On the screen now, you see a timeline for what's going to happen related to that Innovation Summit. I would say, because we're running out of time, please check out the website. You'll see a lot more information about what's going to happen on that 2-day event. It's going to be a half day each day, November 10th and 11th again, with our keynote going out live via LinkedIn on October 21st. So please, as I said, check out the website, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, Betsy, Natalie, or Paige. And with that, I want to say thanks to everyone for joining us. This is a great discussion. Look forward to continuing it next week. And yeah, we'll see everyone soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.